唔係，如果佢話照全部抄做翻一個依次，咪抄一次，跟住打照打一次，咁咪叫交功課。我連點樣整個整翻 section 出嚟？係，即係我哋 download 嗰個嘢喺 Rhino 點樣整個 section 咧？係點樣整個 section？係 GIS 整嘅喎。唔知 export 知唔知咩 shape file 過去咯？
Okay, so that's it.
I'm
going to get rid of all of this extra geometry so that we can actually see that we're getting the lines that we want. So I'm going to get rid of all of the points, the extra points that I added. Okay, so that...
應該唔 true 咧嚇。整咗啲 point， true 就
Before I
係
explain what I modified, I'm going to now. A lot of times when you're doing programming in parametrics, you end up having to draw things like this, which are construction geometry. Okay? You don't really want that geometry in your output, so you actually should delete it each time you create it after you're done with it. So if we go back into our script and we're looping through and creating all of these columns, and we created them by running add line. After we get the division points, we don't need it anymore. On the next line down, we can actually just immediately delete that line, since we're not going to use it again. So after we have the points, we can run rs.delete objects. Type in the ID of the line that we just drew. And that goes through and draws the lines between them. Now there are ways, of course, around drawing the line, but they're much more mathematically complex. What you would have to do if you didn't want to actually construct geometry, which is the easiest thing for us to do because we draw geometry all the time, what you'd have to do is you'd have to say that there is a vector from here to here, and that I want to draw a point in space along that vector. Okay? Vectors are just a point, from the origin. So you can work that way, but just for ease of how we construct things in drawing, it's not easier to draw construction geometry. Now the change that I made to the script when I was getting the error said that the index did not exist. So that means that the list was not defined. So what I changed was I said that as we're looping through each row, so we're on a line and we're looping through each row, I just appended now the division point, etc., onto each row list. The reason that I used append here is because I didn't actually specify the length of this list. So there isn't an item 0, there isn't an item 1, there isn't an item 2, etc. In my mind, I shouldn't have had to do this today. But thinking back to Visual Basic, you do need to do that. And I thought Python was free of that. But you could also specify the length of that list here and fill it with none items similar to this notation. And then we could actually access the column directly because there is a space for it in the matrix. Using this syntax, we're appending. So given the length of a list, for instance, we're on 0, 1, 2, we're on 3, trying to add an item. We can append it to that list that only has a length of 2. It will increase the length by 1 and then fill in that value. That makes some sense. Okay, are there questions?
After append, you have a parentheses, and then inside there's another square parentheses. Can you remind us what that means? Like you have row.
Inside these parentheses?
Yeah, you have row inside.
Okay. Yes.
What does that mean?
So we're trying to get a point into our list of rows and columns. That point is array points line, which represents the points along a vertical line and a particular row.
Right.
Okay? So that's why we're getting, this is, right here is where we're flipping our matrix, is at this point. We're saying that we have a division, we have a line here with division points, and we're going to loop through each of those division points. So row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. And we're going to add the point along here to
The line.
yeah, to that line, or to that row. The reason square brackets are accessing that point on this line. For a little bit more clarity, let's say here, just for clarity, that we're saying it would probably be easier if we just said for row in range 0 to the number of division points, step 1. And this needs to be changed, by the way. Hold on. We're going to add a curve that is array div points index row. Now what we've been doing previously, every time we've run a range, is we saying that we know the length of these lists that we're iterating through. You don't have to know the length of the list. A lot of times the length of the list is variable. So just as an example here, we can actually just say for a row in a range from 0 to the length of array div points, step 1. In Python, that is the length method. So we get the length of that list. We run it from 0 to 0, goes through and creates. So you can see the order just by how Rhino is working through the geometry that this is that the script is operating. It's constructing all of the lines, getting the points, deleting that construction line, putting that point on a list of rows and columns, okay, and then looping through all of those rows and drawing each line based on columns of points. Yes?
Will add the notation for every step so that when we build after
What?
add some notation.
Like comments?
Yeah.
Sure. I will add comments to the majority of the script, so that you can more easily read through it.
Can I ask a very, very, very basic question
of
about
course.
this? So far what I understand is the text in dark blue are commands. In light, well, in blue it's syntax, sort of like the way you write things.
Yeah, statements.
Yeah. And then in black, I understand AR means array, and start point, end point is something you make up, right, for the clarity of...
Even this is made up for clarity.
Oh, okay. So whatever is in black is something that you make up for... It could be like ABC, right? If you know.
Well, it's essentially all of the other code, including the operators.
Right.
So,
but doesn't the operator actually tell the computer something? Like it's...
Yes, it does, but it's not colored with image.
Right, but I mean, we cannot use anything else to replace the equal sign, right? But we can actually, for points line, it's something you made up. It could be array A, right? But equal signs is not something we can replace. So what I'm trying to understand is string, array, DBL, and...
You make it up.
you make it up.
It's your own syntax to know, to tell yourself that I made a variable of this type.
Okay. So how does the computer know that?
Because when you assign, when I assign, Angel's asking some questions about the general syntax and why things are colored the way they are. So if we look at this, we can see some basic things that Rhino helps us out with in terms of color. Anything that is a bright blue is a statement, okay? So the import statement, the for statement, okay? For in, okay? The none is a statement. It's actually creating a none type variable for us in this space. Anything that is in a dark blue is a command. It means it's followed, or a function. It means it's followed by a parenthesis. Okay? Anything that is in red is a string, always. Anything that is in it's a range of blue, but it's in blue is an integer or a double. Okay, it's a number, and everything else that is in black is composed of your own variables that you create and the operators that you're using to work with.
But the computer will recognize that variable again.
The computer in Python. The computer sets the data type when you set the variable. So it looks at the type of data and it sets it to be an integer. Other programming languages such as Visual Basic, you usually need to, or you should usually specify the type specifically. You can do it in Python, but it's not necessary. So this is our introduction to working with lists, okay, in terms of matrices. We created a new matrix called array of points that had a particular number of rows. We made columns, empty columns in each of them. And then we filled in that whole matrix with a list of points here. So now you can see the reason why, sort of, that I made the example where you have essentially rows and essentially columns. There are other transitions, of course, that are not rows and columns. But you have to work through them in similar ways as this. Questions can easily go to either of us. Is there anything else?